40 people now signed in, so we'll make a start. So this is a webinar, a very exciting webinar about the launching of the low carbon off-site construction DPS. And what we're going to be really talking about is not too much about the nuts and bolts, but about how we arrived at this DPS. So we've got various speakers whom I'll introduce in a minute. So we're going to, as I say, be talking about how we got here and how we are launching a DPS plus offering that it takes on the principles of the government's green paper, all about improving procurement. And as it says on the tin, looking at a solution to incubate new housing supply and address the housing crisis. So in terms of who we've got speaking today, and many thanks to the speakers, I'll be doing the introduction and comparing the Q&A at the end. First up, we've got Alison Nichol from Head of Constructing Excellence, BRE, talking about the report that's just been produced on the benefits of modern methods of construction, performance and data settings, performance and data studies. And then we go on to Jez Sweetland, who'll be talking about strategic opportunities and industrial strategy and the Enabling Housing for Inclusive Growth project. After that, we'll have Chris Burrows from Cornwall Council talking about Cornwall Council's housing crisis, and how he thinks, and they think, Cornwall think that the DPS will offer a solution to their homeless situation. Finally, we'll go on to the nuts and bolts of how the DPS and the CMM toolkit are working together. And this is where the DPS Plus comes in, and that will be from our procurement manager, Phil Blackmore, and Lisa Saunders, who's the project manager for the CMM project at YTKO. So just next slide, we'll go on to the next slide. And then finally, I'm sure you're all very familiar with how to do Q&A at the moment. So you open the Q&A window, put your question in there and then send it, and then I'll be reading out the questions at the end. So hope you enjoy the session, and look forward to all your interesting questions and interest at the end of it. Right, so now I'm going to hand over to Alison Nichol, who will start her presentation.
Okay, let me just share my screen properly. Thank you, Mary. Thank you for that introduction. I think it's really important, actually, the work that you're doing. And I think as we go through this presentation, which is very heavy on numbers and data, which is part of what the report was aiming to deliver, we'll see just how important the work that the South West Procurement Alliance is doing in moving this forward. So as Mary mentioned, this report was done in collaboration with Bristol City Council, Bristol Housing Festival, BRE and Ryder Leva Bucknell, and it was funded by Innovate UK as part of enabling the Innovate UK funded project on enabling housing innovation for inclusive growth. It was one of the Innovate UK demonstrator projects, and one of the key objectives was to define what KPIs would be needed for MMC and look at how these stack up against existing housing delivery models. I think the report's been really well received on the basis that it doesn't just look at what's now, but actually what needs to change and how that change could actually impact future delivery. So, you know, with anything that's innovative, it's not going to stack up in the first few attempts, but we've got to keep moving with it. So here are some of the reasons that the project found for the slow uptake of MMC. Currently, we're only delivering about 15,000 homes per year. And that's because this is new. This isn't the norm. And evidence is needed to get people to change what they're doing. So evidence on in-use performance, maintenance and repair costs, adaptability, resilience, and compliance with regulation are all needed to support this selection. There's a lot of risks around the supply chain capacity and poor productivity and reliability. And these are a lot of these are perceived risks that are actually holding back that capacity. some stuff around poor public perception, which I think we're starting to get away from now, and the impact of the skills shortage. And that's been put forward as a risk or a reason for slow uptick. But actually, I think the skills shortage is really going to bite on the traditional market. So it could actually move, tip things over the edge. So I'm going to go through some of the KPIs that have come up. So we've been looking at program and cost KPIs, and I think these are all pretty standard. You've got the decision, why was MMC selected, the number of houses, apartments in the scheme, number of dwellings, pre-construction time, the demolition, the number of weeks it takes to get to each stage in that process. And you can see from this graph, a modular-based approach or an MMC-based approach is really, really accelerating that program. You can see, especially in the pre-construction phase and the actual construction phase, you're really accelerating that program. And you can see here how that there were 6 projects that were used for this data set. We don't have the full data on 2 of those projects. You can see that one of the traditional home or projects was way out ahead in terms, or was way longer than the others. One of the MMC projects was slightly longer, and one of them and that was to do with delays in the substructure and the prelims. And you can really see how this has been accelerated on the other 3 build projects. But the project wasn't just about looking at our traditional measures of time, cost, quality, which we all know is really important. The project was looking at redefining value, which I think the team at Bristol were really keen on. So these are the wider benefits, those intangible benefits. Well, they are actually very tangible. And actually what we were looking at was, how do you make those more tangible? I shouldn't use the word intangible. And how these related at each stage. So how do you minimize local disruption? How do you deliver design and quality and manufacturing? How do you engage with the local community? And how do you deliver those skills and high quality jobs? And then in post-occupancy, how do you deliver value across the life cycle of the asset? So there were a number of redefining value KPIs that have been established, and I think these are really important. So these are using the TOMS database for social value, savings and income due to early completion. And I'll talk through those, because actually those are really important when we're talking to clients about what they need from their assets, what the occupant experience was, costs of use, such as consumption of energy and other resources. And, you know, I've just seen what my energy bill is likely to become the end of April. And we're talking about people who are, you know, in a social housing context, don't have huge levels of disposable incomes to ride these storms. So it's incumbent upon us to deliver them homes that are going to be fit for the future and help deliver that net zero, not just from an environmental perspective, but from an economic and social perspective as well. Again, the maintenance costs, and looking at the end of life, and this is an area that our MMC group within Constructing Excellence is really keen to look at, is, you know, what do you do with that asset at the end of life? How do you make sure that it can be reused? So here are some of the big areas that, you know, those financial things, and quite often it is finance that can tip the balance over. So interest accrued, you're not paying as much interest on the project because you're delivering the project that bit quicker. Increased realization of income streams, so you're able to do more, so you're bringing more revenue in quicker. Revenue savings, so you're not spending as much money. You know, temporary and emergency supported accommodation, that is expensive for local authorities, and it's not delivering the same social benefits to the occupants that that living in high quality well-designed homes delivers. So you can look at that from a revenue perspective, but you can also look at that from the impact of people being able to live better lives, and therefore, what that means in terms of health services, etc., etc. And then retained income. You can, some of the MMC projects that were part of this research project were actually able to use spaces and sites that wouldn't normally be used and had been discounted for traditional methods of delivery. For example, garage sites, or there's some that can sit above car parks. So actually what you're doing is utilizing space that doesn't necessarily lend itself to traditional development approaches. So one of the big things that got a lot of interest from this project was the fact that the analysis was that MMC is around the £3,000 per metre squared at the moment, and that's within the tolerances of development. But that's because at the moment there's small pipelines, short pipelines, and small volumes. So manufacturers don't have they don't have what's needed to help them invest in scale, and that if we did invest, or if we did give them that pipeline, which is what the work of the Southwest Procurement Alliance is really doing, giving them that pipeline, giving them that certainty to invest, that cost could rapidly fall to around £2,000. MMC definitely delivers that faster, cheaper, which is our traditional method of accounting, as well as the cost and quality and the certainty. And I think it's that certainty, what you're going to get from these projects as they become more repeatable. You do understand exactly what you're going to get. What that certainty at the end means that clients have to think differently about how they make design changes. You've got to lock things in early, because late changes mean more costs, and they actually make it unviable. It can make it unviable if you don't lock it in early, if you don't decide at the right point that you're going to take an MMC approach. This is the biggie. It's that MMC requires systemic change and a cultural change in how we go about commissioning and delivering projects. So we've got to move away from those traditional approaches and think differently. And that can be quite difficult, because there might be more upfront costs in order to deliver that saving. And this is where I think the work that Mary and the team and Jez and the team are doing is really important. It's that demand aggregation. No one organisation has the ability to really make this happen on its own, but if we aggregate and come up with some standardization is an overused word, but actually this is about setting the parameters, making sure that you're really clear with the supply chain about what the requirements are going to be. That's what's going to really bring this down. It's going to reduce the cost, but it's also going to deliver that certainty, that choice, etc., in the long term. So that's it for me.
Great, thank you so much, Alison. And let me just quickly go into my screen share, and we'll carry on with a little presentation. So yeah, hi, and thank you to Alison. I think it's so important we start today with the data. This is about really making informed decisions, and the whole sort of thinking that we're trying to pull together is how we start to create that very positive, important feedback loop, particularly as we pivot into a supply chain around, modern methods of construction, where there is that element of a manufacturing process, and we really drive the data, that smart construction thinking. So it's so important that we're aligning our thinking and our credibility with the data that we're gleaning from these sites. What I want to do very briefly was just go a bit further upstream and just talk about how some of this project came together, and the opportunity of working in that sense of the politics of place, because of course housing is not just about development costs, it's not just about viability, it's actually about the way that we talk about our places and experience our sense of collectiveness in a place. So that politics of place is really important. And in a way, when we consider the Bristol Housing Festival as a way of bringing a positive challenge to that thinking about how we deliver our housing, we're all aware of the current challenges are deeply complex. And in some ways, this is a wicked challenge. I mean, we have these different areas around our housing supply, particularly around affordability, the increasing cost around, the challenges around climate and ecological emergencies, the way that will drive further standards and regulations rightly, decarbonising our local energy supplies and our economies. As Alison referred to, the emerging construction skills crisis that we know is a key factor in terms of the ability for the UK to hit those 300,000 homes a year. And all of these inflationary pressures are now exacerbated post-COVID-19 in terms of, commodity prices, land prices, labour prices, and as I say, regulation. And on top of that, unlocking more brownfield, which is not a free pass to reducing cost. Actually, it's around that responsibility of using and stewarding our land well, but that has an additional cost. So there's the challenge. It's wicked, it's difficult. And in that, how do we work collectively around a narrative that is hopeful, a narrative that is courageous, that is thinking strategically, thinking collectively and collaboratively, and how do we change the narrative to build trust? Because so many of the issues that we face, I feel, are around the sort of siloed thinking we end up with between the local authority over here, the development partners over here, the wider public over here looking. And, it seems incredible to me that we have a scenario where most of the stories in the press around housing are bad news. We're talking really about an incompetent local authority or an evil developer. But that's a very maligned and misunderstood reality of the challenges of delivering housing, and particularly affordable housing. So we wanted to come together to talk about a sort of more positive opportunity to have the courage to reimagine and to repurpose. And the context that we find ourselves in collectively is important. We're seeing increasing sort of opportunities in terms of the need to innovate. So, whether it's the Future Home Standard, whether it's sort of Mark Farmer's paper back in 2000, I think it was 16, modernise or die, and then his follow-up paper, Build Homes, Build Jobs, Build Innovation. We're seeing innovation in procurement, not just through what we're going to talk about today, constructing modern methods, and also this organisation building better, but actually they're thinking around how you move to outcome-led procurement. And then there's other projects that I'll refer to later where we'll start to think about that sort of strategic response to engage with this new supply chain of housing and MMC. And why now? Why is the moment now? Well, I think it's a mix of things. I think we've seen increasing reports coming out recognising that things are aligning, where the market, although it's still immature, has matured, and there is a sort of growing opportunities to see MMC unlock. Homes England critically have made such an important contribution to that space in terms of them now requiring that their strategic RP partners deliver 25% of their affordable housing through MMC. That's significant. And what that has then done is seen this increasing investment into the MMC sector. And we're seeing this across the country, whether that's full volumetric suppliers, panelized solutions. We're seeing that there's sort of the capital, the balance sheets, the credibility, as Alison referred to, there's a risk around the security of that supply chain. Well, that is starting to be addressed. And as that investment has happened, we've seen these alignments and these partnerships being announced with modern methods of construction supply chain and the RPs, the Housing Association. So that's starting to give that confidence into how that can be delivered. Because they are starting to aggregate that delivery, they're starting to improve their own experience in terms of development and learning as they go, iterating their manufacture process. And in Bristol, and we'll talk a bit more about Bristol in a moment, but we're seeing more and more sort of modern methods of construction coming forward. And importantly, a recognition politically that this is more than just housing. There's a sort of strategic opportunity here. So, some of the bigger schemes coming forward, they're saying we need to be innovating in the way that we're delivering. So as those things have come forward, we have had this opportunity of working across this huge collaboration of all these different partners with Innovate UK for enabling housing innovation for inclusive growth. And Alison referred to the one paper there, performance data and case studies, and that's probably the kind of what I would call the real science behind what we're trying to learn. And there's other schemes now coming forward where we're hoping to work with BRE and Constructing Excellence to gather more data, because it's so important that, as I say, we're data led. The other report, and both of these are available, and I'll put links up afterwards, was the other piece of this project was, let's do the data, because one of the things we needed to look at was how can MMC help deliver homes more quickly and more cost effectively. And I'm going to talk about cost in a minute. But by aggregating 9 MMC projects across Bristol, working with full volumetric to panelized to local SMEs, single homes, we were looking to see not only can we deliver 450 homes across Bristol, but also can we understand what is the cultural change that needs to happen in and through a council. So we're talking about systemic change, because the decision making, the warranties, the legal frameworks, the sequencing of decision making, the planning process, the design freeze, all of these are problems for a local authority or an RP where we are used to doing development in a certain way, and MMC throws up all these problems. Now, my view about those problems is actually they're a really important opportunity to rethink and to repurpose our housing delivery to be more outcome led. So when I think about the purpose of homes, we're talking about how do we build the right homes that are improving the physical and mental well-being of the population and the physical health of our planet. Now that starts to move you away from just thinking cost to outcome. And I think that's a really important thing. And again, you need the data to demonstrate that. So that other report is there talking about the cultural innovation. And the third, I'll leave Philip and Lee to talk about, but was this sort of optioneering process about how do you give local authorities the confidence and RPs the ability to engage in this fast-moving, fast-developing MMC market. So we recognise that was a significant barrier to entry, because you've got people that are very busy, they're working on a number of schemes, the modern methods of construction industry is emerging, and how do they have the confidence? So what we are hoping that we've moved forward within Bristol, and what we're hoping now to sort of replicate and scale through this DPS and the partnership with CMM, is the ability for organisations not just to bring in consultants, but actually to create that institutional learning and that institutional confidence to engage with MMC and kind of make their systems appropriately adapted to how you really partner with MMC. It's not just a tweak, it is a different business approach, and that's a problem, but it's also an opportunity. And it's important here, perhaps here, just to talk about the homes. A couple of images here, I think, because at the end of the day, we're talking about real homes. So Alison referred to that's the ZPOD scheme on top left. Again, really interesting opportunity to unlock additional land supply. And then on the right, there's the top right, there's Booklook on the Brook. So and then bottom middle, legal and general modular. So these are two of the bigger sort of volumetric schemes. And then on the bottom right is Snug. And that was a local SME. So and again, the reports take you through all those different systems and those outcomes, but it was so important to us that we were delivering affordable homes. So some of these schemes are 100% affordable, some are 50% owned by the council at pace, and pace is key. And we'll talk about that again as we go through this process. So that's just an idea of the homes. And then I just want to close really by reflecting on where are we and what is that kind of almost call to arms, if you like, about why now and how do you engage. And I think the thing that has struck me increasingly about MMC is that we have a huge challenge across the UK about we simply cannot build enough homes within our current methodology. So MMC is an ability to bring on this new supply chain where we can align it with the ability to deliver really good quality, zero carbon, affordable homes at pace. And critically, potentially around a different economic model. So if we think about the majority of our major house builders work around a process of land acquisition, planning uplift, and then they will bring on phases of homes as and when they have to. But the principal capital creation is through, or profit creation is through planning uplift. That's fine. That served us to an extent well. It's allocated risk, and they take the risk, and we need that supply chain to continue to build. But MMC is different because we are talking about how we can engage with a manufactured supply. So we can start to think much more about housing as something I can commission as a local authority and RP. I have more control over the terms of the timing, and I'm engaging that supply chain with a different economic methodology. So it's a challenge, but we really need to think about how it provides a different solution to increasing our housing supply. But the problem is it is a relatively immature housing supply. And I don't mean that with any criticism, but we have to recognize that it needs local authorities and RPs, I think, to have that innovation courage to say, look, we need to step in and incubate the values that underpin how this industry is going to mature in the UK. And that's important because MMC is a tool. we're very passionate about driving that quality and that zero carbon ability to fix our sustainability and our climate emergency, to look at how we tackle energy poverty by really building these homes in the appropriate ways. But MMC could also be an excuse to build poorer quality homes at pace to make more profit. So how local authorities help steward and how RPs help nurture that emerging supply chain, I think, is really important, and that's going to take a collective response and ambition. Again, why CMM and the DPS is so important. And to be clear, cost and value are not the same. And we're seeing this move, whether it's through the CIH Value Toolkit, through the Construction Playbook, through the Social Value Act, to recognizing, particularly when you are stewarding land for the longer term, cost and value are not the same. So when we start to think about, again, the elements that Alison showed in her report about the benefits, if you're a landlord, to bringing on that housing supply quicker, the benefits to taking families out of emergency accommodation. And we're doing work at the moment looking at how we can challenge that viability process that's looking very, with a kind of straitjacket approach to just cost. How can we really think about the sort of the health outcomes and the longer term health benefits, mental and physical, to our cities and populations, by thinking about the data that we need to demonstrate the commitment to invest in the appropriate housing we need. MMC is not a panacea solution. I think it's important to say that, but we, as that market chain, market supply matures, it will iterate. That's the joy of this opportunity. We get to help mature it and move it forward each time. As the manufacturing, the experience develops, I think we will see those efficiencies be driven forward, and that should look ultimately like more cost efficiency as some of that risk is taken out of the process, but also it will look like the ability to reduce, maintenance, snagging, etc. And why is all of that important? Well, because we need to recognize this is going to take a strategic commitment across, I believe, a whole sector of society in terms of the ability to aggregate land. We're now working in Bristol, not just with the council, but also with the combined authority. We're looking at this notion of, well, how would you create a regional strategy which is looking at supporting and insulating that MMC supply chain? So how does that help in terms of that inward investment, that job creation? How does that help in terms of delivering those homes at pace? So I think when we start to sort of move from just the individual site by site, and we start to stand back and we see the opportunity of an industrial strategy piece, I think that's again where we can start to justify more commitment and more investment up front. And I don't mean money, but I mean time and energy to unlock these solutions. So we're very excited about where we've got to. I suppose a lot of these journeys, then you recognise, you look ahead, there's a huge amount of work to do. But again, full credit to councils that are taking the plunge on this. And on that, what I'll do is I'll stop sharing and hand over to Chris from Cornwall Council. Chris, I'm just trying to find my button here. Chris, over to you.
Thanks, Jez. Hello, everyone. I'll just share my screen. I've got a few slides to show. Which I now can't find. I can't seem to find the slides I need to share. A second, hang on.
Would you like us to find them for you, Chris? We've got them.
Yeah, no, sorry, I'm having some technical difficulties, but I think that's working now. Okay, yeah, so I thought I'd talk a little bit today, quick talk about how this work that the project group has been working on. The DPS has got a practical application for a local authority trying to address a housing crisis, and talk a bit about why Cornwall is moving towards MMC and why we think the SWPA DPS could be a procurement solution for us. So currently, I think it's widely accepted now in Cornwall that we have got a housing crisis. So it's probably been going on for a while, but it certainly came to light during the pandemic. So the first wave of the pandemic saw an unprecedented rise in homelessness, particularly among single people, childless couples. So people who are in sort of informal kind of accommodation, perhaps sofa surfing or sharing with friends, or living in houses of multiple occupation. Suddenly those sort of arrangements were closed down to them. In the requirement to self-isolate, so a lot of people got made homeless that way. A lot of people on perhaps 0 hours contracts in the tourism sector were without work. And we just saw an unprecedented surge in demand during the first wave of the pandemic. That's probably been exacerbated since by a kind of perfect storm in Cornwall, with issues that are probably not unique to Cornwall. But at the moment, there's an unprecedented housing market down here and a tourism market. So a lot of houses that were previously available for rent are now Airbnbs or tourist accommodation. House prices for both rent and to purchase have gone through the roof, and it's left ordinary people in housing crisis effectively. So we've currently got over 650 households currently placed in emergency or temporary accommodation, and that includes really unsatisfactory and unsustainable, socially and economically unsustainable accommodation, such as B&Bs and hotels. So people haven't got any cooking facilities other than a kettle. So it's a really dire situation at the moment, and obviously that has financial implications for the authority as well. So only some of that money can be recovered by a housing benefit. So we've currently got significant financial losses at the moment on that temporary accommodation. So part of the response to this was during the pandemic. The first phase, during the everyone in, I'm sure other authorities responded to. We looked at what we could do quickly. Part of the solution was we hired some bung cabin units, some sort of porta cabin type pods, as we come to term them, pods. So they're self-contained, one bed accommodation. So they don't look particularly pretty, but inside they're quite nice. They've got everything someone needs to live in a self-contained unit. And we delivered 2 of these schemes, one in Truro for 11 units and one in Penzance for 10. And it was a bit of an experiment, I think. It was emergency response and no one was quite sure how it was going to go. But we were kind of amazed actually how well it did go. They were extremely successful. There were very few issues, a lot of really good outcomes for people moving on, being helped, given the support they've needed. But some really nice good news stories came out of it. The Truro site has a sense of community established down there. There are things like bacon butty Fridays and growing vegetables in planters and things. It was just really nice to see people being given the opportunity to turn their life around. We got really positive press coverage from it, and it just kind of crystallised in the council's mind really that we shouldn't have needed a pandemic to make this intervention, and perhaps modular is the way to go. So we started to think perhaps modular is part of the solution to this problem, and we've worked on the first scheme that we decided to do on a council-owned brownfield site to provide 10 Z-Pod units, and a really challenging site in Poole near Camborne. So it's for mining area, so it's brownfield, contaminated land, mining features, adjacent to Network Rail, Japanese knotweed, pretty much everything you could throw at a site. But we're really hopeful of a positive outcome here. So this is the site before. That's a picture of what it's going to look like. It's been manufactured in the factory, and the nearly finished units about ready for delivery on site. So the next stage, so that project is going well. So the next stage, we said let's buy some more of these. We want to develop a program on council-owned sites. So we've procured some of these solo house 1-bed units, and again we've got some quite positive press coverage from that. But part of the challenge for us has been a procurement solution. So probably the slowest part of this project for us has been arriving at a procurement solution, which has been really challenging for us. We found that having to use frameworks and compliant frameworks for local authorities, it was difficult. It was the procurement isn't as responsive as this project needs to be, because this is an emergency situation, and procurement was taking too long. So we've had various thoughts about this within the council, but then quite a timely sort of intervention came along with the SWPA, DPS, and the work that they were doing. And we think it could be a good opportunity for us to find a more quick procurement solution. So just rattle through some of the reasons why we think MMC is part of the solution. One one of the advantages it gives is it can be constructed very quickly and delivered to site very quickly. So some of the products we've been looking at can be manufactured in 12 weeks. So that's a considerable time saving of a traditional build bricks and mortar build. They've got typically very high insulation and energy performance properties, which reduce running costs for residents. So that's really important with our client group. We're particularly looking to address the homelessness issue at the moment and people in temporary accommodation. So running costs are really important. Low carbon is really important to Cornwall Council. That's another one of our corporate priorities. So again, that's another advantage. There's currently some supply chain and labour issues with traditional build down in the southwest, in particular. Capacity of traditional bricks and mortar. So a lot of capacity has been taken up by building market homes or tourist accommodation. And a big advantage for us that we see is the units are portable and flexible over time, so they can be demounted and moved to other sites relatively easily, which is helpful for us because we've got a number of sites that are earmarked for kind of regeneration opportunities. So we can use the pods as a meanwhile use and move them to another site when the regen begins. The real driver as well is the revenue savings. So the current cost of putting people up in hotels and B&Bs is unsustainable, whereas these modular units have 60-year lifespan is one of our requirements, the Bow Plus warranty. So they become a long-term asset for the council going forward. So our focus so far has been on one-bed units, but we've also got a need for families. There are families in emergency and temporary accommodation. So the launch for us, because we can appreciate there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes on the data side of things. So we think it could be a really useful tool for us to find a quicker route to market. We think some of the advantages that will be a wider pool of suppliers and a pool of purchasers. The wider pool of purchasers being as part of the SWPA potentially attracts the interest of a wider pool of suppliers, which will increase competition and choice for purchasers. We think it's a quick and more flexible procurement route, because the traditional framework is fixed for a number of years. Once there's a number of suppliers are on that framework, that's it fixed, whereas the DPS suppliers can onboard at any time, and which is helpful. So there'll be a continued evolution of suppliers on the DPS. So our plan is to be part of the launch of the DPS, which we're really excited about, and to pilot it. For our initial pilot, will be to go out for up to 30 2- and 3-bed units across 4 or 5 sites that we've identified. We're really excited about being part of the launch of the DPS. Just to say a bit about the scale of our ambition. So at the moment, MMC is still growing. Our experience of it is still growing, but I think there's a real appetite in Cornwall to ramp this up, potentially across a range of unit types and for tenures. So at the moment, the focus is on homeless accommodation, but there's no reason why this couldn't be applied to different tenures. So we're looking at potentially around 200 units. That's the sort of scale of our ambition in the next couple of years. Okay, I'll stop sharing, and I think I'm handing over to Lisa. And Phil.
I think it's me, Chris. Yeah, I think it's me.
Yeah.
Just let me share my screen. Okay. Hopefully you can all see that. Yeah, thanks, Chris. Hi, everyone.
No, we haven't got anything yet, Phil.
Have we not? 2 seconds. I can see it, but oh, is that better?
Yeah, we've got that now.
Yeah, let me play that. Well, if I play the slideshows, that you can see that.
Yeah, we've got it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, as Mary said, I'm the regional procurement manager at SWPA, and I'm going to give you a very quick overview of the DPS what it covers, the kind of benefits compared to a framework, and then how it kind of interacts with the CMM digital toolkit. So let's start with what the DPS covers. It quite simply covers all types of residential dwellings and associated community buildings and facilities, and also covers all types of MMC systems and categories. We've deliberately labelled this DPS as low carbon as opposed to a zero carbon DPS, as we know that not all suppliers can currently achieve net zero, but obviously what we, and I know most of the market, is looking to accomplish this by 2030. Next slide. So I'm just So we felt that because MMC is still an emerging developing market, that the flexibility and opportunity that DPS offers clients and suppliers would be better suited than a framework. We wanted to create a procurement product which could move with the MMC marketplace, which is obviously fast moving and constantly evolving. So what are the differences between our DPS and a traditional framework, and how does this really benefit clients and suppliers? So the kind of four main areas really are, the first one being that suppliers can join at any time, which is perfect for a growing, developing marketplace. It avoids supplier lockout, and it means that suppliers can grow alongside the procurement process rather than having to work around a rigid framework with restrictive timescales. And from the client's perspective, it continuously gives them access to a current, up-to-date, open marketplace. No direct awards. I feel this is pivotal within an emergent marketplace, as it always gives suppliers an opportunity to compete for public sector work, because a mini competition has to be undertaken every time. Obviously, having to run a mini competition every time for clients can take more time than a simple direct award. But what it does do, it provides increased competition. And obviously there's always opportunity to consolidate programs of work and running a mini competition, aggregating a number of schemes, which can potentially give you the benefits of greater economies of scale. Pricing is determined at contract award stage. So no pricing is requested at DPS application stage, only when the client is calling off through their mini competition. Again, with a developing marketplace like MMC, with technology constantly evolving, wanting to allow more innovation and material prices frequently changing, the flexibility of the DPS acknowledges all of these factors, and all of which can be achieved. And the final one is there being no limit on the number of suppliers who can join, which to some may be a negative thing, but generally with a DPS, a client would have to go out to all suppliers, which could potentially be 20, 30 companies. But the real benefit to clients and suppliers is the magic and inclusion of the innovative CMM digital toolkit, which I'll touch on briefly in my next slide, and Lisa will talk about also shortly. So we like to describe the DPS and the toolkit process as a procurement and delivery wrapper. And as you can see, we have the CMM toolkit sat in the middle and wrapped around by the client and supplier inputs, where both the supplier at DPS application stage and the client at call-off stage will engage with the toolkit. Suppliers are required to input their MMC information and offering into the toolkit at DPS application stage. So the category of MMC they deliver, the accreditations they hold, how many units they can deliver, the regions they can deliver in, energy performance, that sort of thing. The client will then input their specific site requirements into the toolkit when they're ready to call off, and will receive a short list of suppliers and those that can meet those specific site requirements. This process makes the call-off stage less painful for suppliers, as they shouldn't be competing against 20, 30 companies every time. They'll be competing on more of a level playing field against a smaller pool. And for clients, this gives them the assurance that there is an MMC solution prior to going out to market. And from an evaluation perspective, evaluating 3, 4, 5 bids versus 20 to 30 is obviously a lot less painful. Final slide. So this is because of the toolkit. We haven't had to include any complex work streams or lot structures. The toolkit only shortlists the suppliers who can meet those client-specific site requirements, and it basically acts as a work stream filter, I guess. We simply have 4 financial lots that suppliers can bid for. Applicants must meet the minimum turnover threshold to obtain a place on the DPS, but we also look at things like the supply credit safe scoring, suppliers' current assets, profitability, liquidity, that sort of thing as well. But we've tried to make the DPS more open for smaller kind of startup emerging companies. So we've given a little bit more flexibility for the micro lot to help those type of companies. So we can potentially, so if, for example, they didn't quite meet the turnover threshold, we could potentially ask for more information, for example, around kind of future order book, for example. But as much as we want every company on the DPS, we have to be able to give assurance to our clients that we have carried out the necessary financial due diligence. But the important thing is, because the solution is very much client-led, clients have the ability to carry out additional checks at call-off stage, which I'm obviously sure they will do. Well, that's it for me. I'll stop sharing and I'll hand over to Lisa Saunders, who will talk more about the toolkit and CMM.
Hi everybody, thanks for that, Phil. I'm just now going to try and share mine, so bear with me. This all worked really well in practice, so here's hoping. Right. So as we've been hearing today from the speakers, thank you so much for all of those paving the way, really, for what I'm about to talk to you guys about. I kind of wanted to, I guess, talk a little bit more about that added value bolt-on that we've been mentioning to this procurement system. And the toolkit alone is a fantastic product, which does help respond to this need within the MMC industry and the needs of local authorities and housing associations. But I think quite simply, it requires that procurement vehicle to enable public sector clients to utilise the toolkit and have that ability to run those ODU compliant procurements. And I think it's really important that the main thing that I kind of get across to you guys today is that this tool is about making sure that the full spectrum of products is visible and accessible to those decision makers, and helping them narrow down that sort of field to a number of possible options based on local policies and project specific criteria. And this toolkit is to support innovation. So by allowing those smaller, newer companies in some of those micro lots that Phil was mentioning just before me, it really does allow them companies to bring their solutions to the table in a way that, I guess, relying on individual knowledge and previous experience otherwise tends towards more known, familiar options. So taking you back just briefly, the Innovate UK project that we've mentioned is the Enabling Housing Innovation for Inclusive Growth. I can't believe I still get those in the right order. It's quite a bit of a tongue twister. And that was led by YTKO, the company that I work for, and we worked with a consortium of partners, including, as you can see, Bristol City Council, Bristol Housing Festival, BRE, and 9 modular housing companies. And this was towards that delivery of that research, development and innovation in the use of modern methods of construction. So whilst I don't want to go over and rehash all of the great points that we realised and identified the rationale behind such a project, but it's really evident that using traditional methods, it's just not been possible to provide homes, enough homes to tackle the housing crisis. And this project helped to unlock those current barriers and enable the consortium to examine how using modern methods of construction can address those 3 main challenges. It sounds pretty desperate, doesn't it? The housing crisis, the climate crisis, the construction skills shortage, but it's really evident. And this really does go, this project really went well into kind of understanding how we could offer a solution to those areas. So here are some of the 9 modular developers and suppliers that we worked with on this project, which was funded again, Innovate UK. And this helped address those barriers to the delivery of new homes and really providing a bit of a balance to the supply of new homes with the growing demand. And a major part of this funded project was to use the opportunity to consider, as Jez rightly put, to consider housing holistically, not just to build units, but really consider the implications of the way the homes and communities are built and those knock-on effects of those decisions. And I really enjoyed you showing those snapshots of the pilots from the project. I think that really puts it into into play that we're talking about homes here. We really need to explore ways of which to lower that carbon footprint of the housing sector, which contributes to 27% of the total UK emissions. And I think, the reason why we're all here is we understand that the current procurement rules kind of hamper innovations by precluding those immature technologies and suppliers. So really what we set about to do was to offer this solution as best we can. There's many others out there, but I think what's really important and what we wanted to set was that we've gone for an established procurement solution and offers so much more flexibility than the framework, as Phil's already mentioned, the differences between that. And whilst separately, both solutions in their own right, a DPS and a toolkit like ours, they kind of, they work within their own right, but together they create such a unique and innovative procurement product, which offers a vast number of benefits for those public sector clients and manufacturers of MMC. And I just wanted to perhaps talk very briefly about sort of the tool itself. We have done various demonstrations of this. So by all means, if you would like another demo, then reach out and let us know. But we've done various workshops, and why I kind of given you the bit of the backstory is that this isn't based around a bunch of people that sat on a table and went, oh, this could help. This is there's reports and there's been so many projects around this as being a solution. And building this digital toolkit, we've gone through some really critical testing with stakeholders and partners within the Innovate UK project. Bristol City Council bravely shone a light on their sort of systems and what they were looking at. And we did various workshops with them around really what became really apparent really quickly was that in order for this digital toolkit to work and to be as effective as it possibly could, it had to be really flexible. So as much as we were working around what KPIs housing commissioners needed, it was around making sure that this wasn't just set in stone. We had to make sure that there was some flex with the tool. So for quite a while now, we've gone through and while sort of going through this whole setup and constant testing of the tool, we've created a bit of a wish list that we're churning through. So this pilot from Cornwall, is really important to start testing what we've worked really tirelessly on over the last 2 years and make sure that the tool has got a number of functionalities that will withstand the new and emerging technologies that are yet to come in this area. So the KPIs, we've got lots of information that we can share with you around the KPIs it collects. I know a number of the 9 modular partners that some of them are on this call today, but they've had that first hand in testing and helping us shape this. So a number of you are aware of how difficult this has been to narrow down these fields. So what I'd really like to do is, just to sort of reach out really, if anybody is interested in finding out a little bit more, then please, by all means, let us know. But there's some key areas of which this tool helps shape, and it's been often referred to as a compare the market for MMC. So it gives a real finger on the pulse opportunity to see what's available in the marketplace. And I think one of my favorite parts of the tool is whilst it responds really dynamically to the data that is existing in the back end, it's constantly pulling on what is available. So if as a housing commissioner, a request is made that quite simply the market can't offer yet, it kind of does that at the very early stage so that you don't have to go down a lot of these sort of endless alleys where you kind of it's quite painful to get to that process. We're kind of doing that really quickly as part of the tool, and then a number of those options are available around energy efficiencies, the cost, type, topologies, social value. So we've gone through and really sort of honed its craft, if you like, around those key areas. And there's things, as Phil mentioned, around the warranties and certifications that we collect. Also within energy efficiencies, it really is important that we highlighted how people were able to optioneer against energy efficiencies and EPCs and all of those sourcing accreditations, which was really became really apparent to us. Once you start pulling at that thread, it can lead you in so many different places. So the idea is that all of the data that is hosted in the back end, it's all on show, so we don't narrow it down into any boxes. It's quite simply dynamic enough to pick up what data we've collected, and then it highlights that to the Housing Commissioner as they go through and select their sort of scheme configuration. So what I'll do is I'll stop there, and obviously I'll hand back to Mary to go through the next stage of this Q&A.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, everybody. Well, I think what you've had from all the speakers is a real flavour of the work and the effort that has been put in by all parties, the Innovation UK project, Cornwall and their look for a solution to their housing crisis, and how we have reached where we are today, which is launching a procurement solution for MMC. A lot more work to go forward, a lot more work. We've had some really good analysis from the BRE report, but I think we can't just say job done, there you go. There's so much more work to do, so much more learning to do. We're really, really pleased that Cornwall wants to be the first ones to try it out, and we'll learn a lot from that going forward. I have got a few questions that have come up in the Q&A box, and a few that we had earlier. I think we've got some time. We did book this in for an hour and a half, but we do appreciate that everybody's very busy. So we'll answer the questions going through, but do feel free if you want to email us. We'll give our contact details out. And as I said in the chat, we will be putting the webinar on YouTube and sending an information pack to everybody who has either signed up or attended. And we had a lot of people who were very interested but couldn't come. But anyway, let me just go to the 3 questions that are in the Q&A, and then I'll move on to the earlier questions that I had. So a question specifically for Alison here. You said the 15,000 homes per annum that were being built, are they factory made type 1 volumetric, or does that include type 2 panel systems? So I'm not sure whether you can answer that one quickly.
I'm not sure on that one. I'll have to go away and check the data, because there is quite a big, obviously, MMC covers quite a range of things, and those different levels. But I think 15,000, based on some of the discussions I've been having, seems quite high for volumetric. So I would say it's likely to cover all ranges of MMC, unfortunately, because we actually need to get to that 15,000 of.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think because the project was looking at category 1, so 3D, and then 2D sort of panelized. I think that's right, Alison, that it would refer not just exclusively to volumetric, but we should definitely verify that again with BRE. But that would be my impression of the way the data was pulled.
Yeah, and I think we do need to move away from this view that just the volumetric is the only solution, because there are a lot of other solutions that open this up to a much wider range of applications and deliver the benefits.
I do agree. I just wanted to add as well, with the housing type, a lot of the work that we've been doing with the developers and their information that they've offered as a result of this tool is around a hybrid option. So we don't necessarily stick to those categories that have been defined by government. There are many other options that are available, and it's about bringing that together to see what is around in the marketplace. I completely agree there, Alison.
Mary, sorry, you're on mute.
Yeah, no, it's all right. I'm just going on to the next question then. Thank you very much for that. The next question is really interesting, and it sort of points to the future, really. It's what are the long-term risks if standardization of products isn't available between manufacturers? And what's stopping standardizations from being used? I'm just going to answer that question a bit myself, because I think there have been a lot of energy has been put into standardization of products and standardization of house types and things. And I think this is the future. This is where we've got to get to. You know, certainly in terms maybe of sizes, module sizes. And I think whilst we are still, you know, looking at individual products and individual one-off projects, we're not probably going to reap complete benefits. But I'll shut up there and let one of the other panelists talk a bit more about that. Who wants to have a go first?
I think there's a lot of misconceptions around standardization, that it means that houses all look the same. And I think that needs to be shut down first. But actually, I think there's been a lot of work around some of the stuff that the Construction Innovation Hub has done around platform-based approaches, so that things can integrate and you're creating a platform that allows manufacturers to innovate off and deliver better performance. I think a lot of people can confuse having proprietary systems with having competitive advantage. But if you've got a proprietary system, you will have a large proportion of not a very large market. Whereas if you collaborate and deliver that standardization, it opens up a much bigger market.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think in terms of the question, what the long-term risks, I suppose what we're looking at is that we'll see a sort of an increasingly complex and disconnected market. So the risk would be A, cost, B, the fact that the systems aren't interoperable, that we have the sort of single point of failure risk where, you know, should a supplier not be able to deliver, you're stuck waiting for that because you've designed, you know, the whole housing solution around that particular part of the supply chain. Just turning the question on its head a little bit, if I might, I think one of the questions that is really interesting from my perspective is, you know, a lot of these MMC supply chain partners have spent millions of pounds and a good number of years investing in a technological solution, which the government and the market was saying, wouldn't it be great if we had this as a solution? And the opportunity to look at how, you know, that their systems can align, how we get that sort of supply chain integration where a lot of the things that they're building in may be more interoperable, I think will start to happen when that supply chain is maturing, where there is that aggregated demand. Because what we're then saying to that supply chain is, look, you're not in a crisis mode where you're sort of scrambling around trying to get your next piece of land and development opportunity. You're in a nurturing mode where we want to work with you and then help you mature and help you realize the benefits both to yourselves as a supply chain, but also to yourselves as a business around creating that interoperability. So again, I think that's an industrial strategy piece that if we don't take seriously, it's very hard for that supply chain to do until there's that real commitment to aggregate demand and work with them. And I think that is starting to happen, but it will gain pace the more that organisations like, you know, Cornwall Council and others step in and create that landscape where they can take the innovation risk to further sort of standardise their supply.
Thank you, Jez. I'll just move on because we seem to be having quite a few more questions coming in. Quite a quick one, probably. In a high density zone, what are the levels of risks when considering the volumetric construction of the prefab buildings? So I'm taking this as being something about the delivering the modules to site. I don't know whether anybody wants to pitch in there or. No.
I think so. We've got some really interesting. There's a scheme in Bristol and Bath Road at the moment with the Milas Group, which is a really high density site. It's a very narrow site. One side is a river. They've had to be incredibly innovative in terms of how they've unlocked that site to deliver. It's actually not just full volumetric. It's panelized, but the cranes operating on that site, they're lifting over a number of its existing buildings. I think, again, you know, what Lisa was referring to earlier is really important, that when you start to look at a pipeline of land, what you start to recognize is that the volumetric supply chain and then the sort of the more panelized solutions, they provide you different ways to sort of mitigate risk on site delivery. Volumetric is a fantastic solution if you've got the right kind of site. Conversely, what we're seeing with the panelizers, they can sometimes in that higher density, unlock sort of more complex sites. So I think it's a question of understanding more about that site and then looking for the right solution, rather than, because it's the wisdom of that decision-making process, rather than saying we have to do this volumetric, or we have to do it panelized, or we have to do it traditional build. So I think have a look at the right fit for that particular scheme, and then absolutely you can mitigate risk depending on what that solution is.
Thank you, Jez. The next question, quite a quick one. Is this DPS open to universities to use? It would be on the housing side, on the student accommodation side, I'll answer that, but not for the teaching facilities. Unfortunately, we did this particularly for the housing market. So, but student accommodation does come under that as well. We take that on. If you want to discuss it further, please do get in contact with Phil Blackmore from SWPA. So we've had a question from Ian, which I think is slightly directed towards Christopher Rose. I hope I'm not putting you too much on the spot, Chris. But it says, great to see Cornwall making the right steps towards MMC delivery. However, 200 units over 4 years split between various suppliers won't see the step change required. What is it that stops something like Langarth Garden Village being progressed via an MMC approach? And I know, Chris, you were talking earlier before we started about Cornwall looking at MMC for other areas. So I don't know whether you can expand a bit on that question and the Langarth Village one in particular.
Yeah, thanks, Mary. There's nothing to stop MMC being used on a wider scale than that. For a range of tenures. So we've been exploring the idea of the current critical need in Cornwall is for the homelessness and the temporary accommodation. But there's no reason why the products can't be used flexibly, either over a period of time or procured especially for a different client group. So affordable housing or key worker, or we've been talking to partners like the NHS. So they've got very similar needs in hospitals at the moment for accommodation that can discharge patients to housing providers. So yeah, I think that scale is fairly ambitious for Cornwall, 200. But to be honest, every time we review it, that number increases. I think it's up to the kind of MMC market really to demonstrate to Cornwall that it can meet our needs, and then that's not a sort of maximum number. That number. Why it's probably not applicable directly to the Langarth Village is probably, we're new to this. We are piloting the DPS, we're piloting MMC, so that's our first modular site at Cowden's Mill. So we're not going to sort of jump in and plan a 1,000-home town using MMC, but once we prove the concept, then yeah, the sky's the limit really in terms of the scale we could scale up to. And Langarth, if you know Truro, the person who asked the question, that is an area that we think would work really well for key worker MMC. So an element of the Langarth Village could very well come forward as MMC because it's adjacent to hospital, it's near the college. So yeah, we think the key worker accommodation could work really well at Langarth.
Can I just add to that,
yes,
Mary? I think Chris makes a really important point that there is nothing to stop MMC being used, but actually organisations, local authorities, they do have to go through kind of creating that institutional confidence and experience to engage with MMC, and so that iterating it from some of these smaller scale to understand that risk, manage that risk is really important. And we've seen that happening, in other parts of the country now. In Bristol, we're looking at sort of 1,600 home scheme, but there is also supply chain challenge there around. What is the business method? What's the business structure, the development structure? Because, for example, is it a land-led deal? Is it a joint venture partnership? Where does the sales risk sit? Does the MMC supply chain, many of whom rightly want to be a turnkey contractor, can't provide all the capital up front and then wait for the sales risk off the back? So there's some challenges still in terms of the scale of those bigger deliveries. That there are members in the market that can do that, absolutely, but they're probably currently quite limited. And again, therefore, the support that Homes England are putting into the market as it matures to get it to that level of scale is coming, but we're still learning how to get to that scale at pace, which is where we need to get to.
Thank you, Jez. Quite a detailed question for you, Phil. We have, this is from a supplier. We have a £2 million turnover, 5 million PI cover, and 95% complete on our BOPAS accreditation to be able to take on 1 million contracts. Is this possible, as the three levels in the three levels do not appear proportional in turnover versus contract size? So maybe if you could just share the screen. Can you share the screen again with that and we can just reiterate that?
I'm trying to, I'll try to explain. 2 seconds.
Whilst Phil's doing that, I think, Lisa, you did say that if anybody wants to find out more about the CMM toolkit, that they could just get in touch with you. Maybe you could, we will be sending out your contact details, but maybe if you could put them in the chat, that would be very useful for people as well. Yes.
Yeah, no problem.
Here we are, Phil.
I guess the I don't know if there's any simple answer really, but we've had long conversations internally about this. This is probably the kind of one of the most complex parts of the DPS, Mary, isn't it? Been over the last kind of year or so, trying to come up with kind of lot structures which are kind of, it kind of meets ticks the box from a client perspective in terms of their due diligence and making sure that we're giving them assurance that we're doing that, but also trying to be really flexible in terms of trying to get new startup emerging companies on the DPS. It's a real fine line, but yeah, so we have to create some structure, but also trying to be flexible. And but I mean the standard, generally the standard approach across our frameworks and DPSs and probably I think across the industry is that it's 1.5 or 2 times generally the turnover requirement versus the project value. So if the project value is 100,000, we tend to have to times that by 1.5 or up to 2 times to create that kind of minimum turnover threshold. So it's generally industry standard and practice. So we've kind of tried to follow that, but also trying to be kind of flexible and give that flexibility, particularly to the smaller lots.
Thank you, Phil. And I think one of the things about the DPS is there's nothing to stop you reapplying, putting in your information, saying my turnover has increased, or look at my order book, and then moving up the lots. And it's absolutely what it's all about. We have had one more question come in, but a very quick question that we had earlier, and maybe Phil, you could just say, is how long does it take for me to get on the DPS? I've seen this fantastic opportunity come through being advertised. How long will it take me to get accredited so that I can take advantage of that opportunity?
Simple answer is 15 days. It's 10 days legally, but but allowed up to 15 for more kind of complex procedures, which this is because of the toolkit integration. So 15 working days. That's a kind of real benefit to clients, really, because if they've got an incumbent supplier, or there's a particular supplier that they want included within their call off, then knowing that within 15 days they could be on the DPS and be available for call off is a real benefit for clients. So, but yeah, 15 days.
And another question that's coming in, and it's great they're all flying in, is MMC will be manufactured and led with full integration from the supply chain from the outset in the future. What's the panel's view of this end-to-end approach now being adopted by various clients? So I'm assuming that that this is a question about starting off right at the word go with the MMC supplier. I don't know whether you've got a view, Alison, on this completely integrated approach, or if I'm not putting you on the spot too much, and whether that's being adopted across the national scene.
I think there are pockets of it being adopted, and we're seeing people who are really leading the way. I think it does require this whole culture, contracts, just it almost turns the traditional way that the construction industry has functioned on its head, and there's going to be winners and losers in that. There's a lot of change that's coming through. You're starting to see people move up and down the supply chain. So you're getting people who are moving, you've got tier 2s who are sort of moving up the supply chain. You've got tier 1s who are looking to acquire capability further down the supply chain. You've got people who are looking at developing really integrated collaborative relationships with a fixed number of suppliers. So it's all to play for. I think it's a very exciting world at the moment. Don't know what the answer is actually going to be, but there's going to be something that just needs to change, because the way we're structured at the moment won't deliver this properly, and we need to sort of think of those new ways of doing it. So, and I think we're going to change and evolve as that moves forward, and what we're going to see is that pace of that commercial change happen a lot quicker over the next sort of decades. It hasn't really changed significantly for decades, but I think it's good. We're just going to have to get used to this all moving around a lot quicker, which is quite exciting and slightly scary.
I think in Constructing Excellence Southwest, we've been doing a lot of investigation of digital facilitators, digital enablers, so the designers at the front end of the MMC supply chain. And really, I think there is a whole market emerging of either MMC suppliers who have a very good digital feasibility tool at the beginning of their product, and that is being used by clients, or standalone digital suppliers who can work with various digital companies who can work with various suppliers. And I think it's that integration and it's that new way of doing things using all the digital tools that are there.
It's not quite just delivering what we've always done, how we've always done it. And I think there were a few early MMC suppliers that were just looking to recreate what happened on site within a factory, and the limitations of that are becoming rapidly apparent. So it is about, this really does require us to really think differently.
Yes, I mean it's a digital interpreting designs digitally and then feeding them through to factories that are automated and have robots and can cope with different parameters, different dimensions. I just can envisage that smooth thing. Jez, you wanted to say something there.
And also we're going to start to have to think about the end, the life cycle of these homes. So of course, what you start to design into that is how that fabric first approach allows that material to be reused and recycled. So I think it is, what we know about modern methods is that to really gain its efficiency out of the system, you can't sort of just go through that traditional process and then see if you can do MMC halfway through the project, because you're not really aligning it to how it's efficient. But I think for me in the question, it's a sort of form versus function, and that what we really need to be clear about within these end-to-end systems and what are the values. So again, going back to Lisa's question, outcome-led procurement, what we need to ensure is driven into those systems as they mature is what is it we're trying to achieve. Because if the only measure is going to be about saving cost, that's going to be very difficult to really create that value proposition around zero carbon, sustainable, affordable homes, particularly when we're going to be looking at that ecological emergency and unlocking brownfield sites that, by nature and definition tend to be more expensive. So form function, I think probably that is the way that we'll see some of the market mature. The challenge for the commissioning partners is what is it that we're asking them to build, and how are we going to justify the viability of that as we move into sort of a chase and a race to get better quality and outcomes from our housing.
Yes, and I do think that the work that has been done with BRE, and I'm probably going to put Alison on the spot again here, that the data that we need from the early adopters to move forward and to provide that comfort zone for clients. I don't know whether you want to talk about what interest, the level of interest for the data and tools.
We're talking quite a lot at the moment about that whole data piece across the board. And actually I'm talking to about how we use our performance measurement group to look at data and how we analyze that data, because what we know is that digital technology can give us lots and lots of data. It's how do we create an environment that people want to share their data in a safe way, and actually extract knowledge from that data that can enable better decision making, because I think there's a lot of data out there, and data can be used to prove or disprove lots of things, and it's how do we make sure that that data is robust, and make sure that people have a comfort in how they're collecting it, how they're using it, and how they can really use it to drive that better performance and better decision making. And I can't quite talk about it yet because we haven't had the meeting, but I think there's going to be something quite exciting coming out of that.
Thank you. Are there any more questions from our audience? I can see you're still sticking there loyally in with it. Is there another one? There's somebody who's commented and says that it's very pleased to see such a rounded view taking into account more than cost. And I think that is very true. And I think, you know, what we're trying to do is to make the whole process easy, smooth, provide clients with a whole rounded view of what is out there, what they can do, how they can deliver it. But at the end of the day, what we are really all about is providing affordable homes to meet the housing crisis, and affordable in terms of construction costs, but much more importantly, affordable in terms of use costs, because I think that is everybody, you know, has been shocked by their personal energy bills coming through with the projections for what's in the future. And it's just for families, you know, and individuals, you know, in housing crisis, that is just so important. So I'm going to ask if every one of our panelists wants to say a final word, and maybe we'll wrap up there. I'll start in the running order. Alison, have you got a final word to say?
Just a huge thank you for getting me involved, and I'm really pleased that, you know, the work that you guys are doing is so important, and, you know, I think you're really leading the way on this, and we need to find ways to make sure that that knowledge gets shared across the country, because, you know, you are pushing the boundaries here.
Thank you, Alison. Jez, you were next. I'm sure you've got a final word.
I think it's great to see the collaboration and sort of actually, you know, the ambition that we've always had as a group is this isn't about just talking, it's about getting things done in the real world. So without partners like Bristol Council and Cornwall, we can just talk, but we actually need to see housing built, and that's the critical thing. And then I suppose a call really to action, which is, you know, the Trowers and Hamlins report is so interesting, how many housing commissioners are sort of sitting on the edge of this and waiting to watch how it's going to emerge. And the missed opportunity there is that by stepping in early, you actually help incubate how the value proposition within that industry is going to develop. And so I just encourage people to think about, how do you engage? Don't do it as a pilot. Think strategically, long-term industrial strategy, fixing the genuine supply chain demands that we have. So yeah, get involved if you can. That'd be great.
Chris, have you got a final word you'd like to share or say?
Yeah, thanks for asking me to speak today. Hopefully it's been useful to people to see how the toolkit and the DPS could be picked up by local authority and be of use. So yeah, we're looking forward to trialling it, and hopefully be a great success.
Thank you, Chris. Phil, have you got anything you'd like to say as a final word?
I'll just say that this is you know, as all the speakers have kind of said, really, it's a really exciting time to be involved in Offsite and MMC, and for us, as an organisation and as a partnership, it's exciting times. We've got a lot of interest in the DPS from a supplier perspective. Some really good conversations we're having, and now obviously with Cornwall and Bristol City, we're having some really great conversations with clients as well. We're really keen to start putting some pipeline of work through it. So yeah, no, really exciting times.
Thank you. And Lisa, last but not least, yes.
Of course. I just wanted to say really how lovely it is to be surrounded by a lot of these speakers. We're all coming from the same agenda point, and it's just nice for that to be recognised, that we're talking about homes, you know, we're talking about value, not cost. So yeah, my main call to action would be for anybody that is, considering joining, by all means, book in a call. There's no commitment. You can access the information there freely, and we can just go through that and answer any questions that you've got. So by all means, get in touch, and we'll get you scheduled in for a demonstration.
So thank you everybody for listening. Thank you everybody for your speakers. And behind all the speakers are teams and teams of people who've been working on this project in their various guises, and will be working in the future on this project. So the fun doesn't stop here. It is quite fun, actually. Yeah, it's quite fun to be innovative and pushing the boundaries and doing some good. So yeah, it's what we get up and go out to work in the morning or sit at home in front of our screens to do. So yes, thank you very much for your participation. As I said, we will be sending out an info pack to all people who've attended, and do get in touch anyway if you want to in the meantime, and look forward to producing reports on the success of all we're doing in the not too distant future. Bye bye all. Thank you.